Welcome to Eco Solidarity Update, Episode 5. The theme of our update today is Trump's war on nature. It's the bomb. My name is Tanya Nuñez from the Alliance for Global Justice, and I'm joined by my colleague, James Patrick Jordan.
Be sure and tune in for our feature segments following the update, including parts 2 of our interviews with Gilvânia Ferreira da Siilva of Brazil's MST or Landless movement, and Erick Saenz, an eco-defender, teacher, and union member from Iquitos, Peru, located along the Amazon River. We will also include a special analysis from Tanya. Finally, we will close with a couple of musical segments recorded in the recent mass demonstration for labor reform at the Plaza Bolívar in Bogotá, Colombia. But before we get to all that, we want to remind you to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and share with your friends and family so they can also tune in to hear this important information.
Incoming President Donald Trump wasted no time in launching what can only be called an all-out assault on nature and the planet. Starting on his very first day in office, Trump issued decrees withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Accords, as well as edicts to aggressively promote oil drilling. This was despite the fact that, as we reported in episode 4, the U.S. is already the world's largest oil producer and the second largest producer of greenhouse emissions, with only 5% of the world's population. Under the Biden administration, the U.S. produced 30 million barrels of oil a day on average, the highest level in history.
On Trump's very first day in office, he took direct aim at government policies and commitments designed to at least partially address global warming. His order, entitled Putting America First in International Environmental Agreements, pulled the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord, as well as the Biden administration's U.S. International Climate Finance Plan.
The Paris Accords and Biden's climate finance plan were, at best, weak and unenforceable because of U.S. and European pandering to big corporate interests. Perhaps most egregious is their failure to address the extraordinary emissions of the greenhouse gases due to militarism and war. However, they were replaced with what can only be described in an all-out assault against Earth itself on the part of the incoming Trump administration.
The withdrawal from climate agreements was accompanied by several edicts aimed at fulfilling the motto of "Drill, Baby, Drill" that was first adopted at the 2008 Republican National Convention. These include the Unleashing American Energy Executive Order, encouraging energy exploration and production on federal lands and waters, and removing regulations to promote electric vehicles. The order declaring a national emergency to enable the lease of lands for oil and gas production and pipeline construction, while excluding renewable energy sources from consideration, and the edict Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Energy Potential, which prioritizes development of Alaska's natural gas reserves and ends restrictions on mining, drilling, and road building. All of these measures were dictated on the very first day that Trump assumed the presidency for the second time.
A number of other orders were issued that first and following days relevant to climate change. These include edicts regarding immigration disaster preparedness. Sean McAllister is the editor-in-chief of Group Communications for the Zurich Insurance Group. The Zurich Insurance Group is a 150-year-old business with more than 63,000 workers in 200 different countries.
Oh no, not those radicals again.
Right. As I was saying, McAllister, writing for the Zurich Insurance Group, notes that climate migration is devastating people's lives. Imagine losing your home or livelihood due to a flood, going hungry because of a failed harvest or drought, or being forced to flee your village due to desertification, rising sea levels, or a lack of clean drinking water. This is a reality for millions and millions of climate refugees. An annual average of 21.5 million people were forcibly displaced each year by weather-related events, such as floods, storms, wildfires, and droughts. Between 2008 and 2016, according to the International Displacement Monitoring Center, This figure reached a record 32.6 million in 2022. The IEP, an international think tank, expects this number to surge. It predicts that 1.2 billion people could be displaced globally by 2050 due to the rise in extreme weather and natural disasters.
The major contributors to climate change are not the most vulnerable countries most affected by global warming. They are the biggest, richest, and most industrialized countries. Yet Trump began his first week in office by setting in motion his plan for mass deportations of people who are more often than not residents of the most impacted nations.
Trump has likewise ordered the military's Northern Command to seal the borders with both Canada and Mexico. He ended any and all applications for refugee status in the US. The Trump administration's anti immigrant policies are a component of his war on planet Earth.
Tanya, I'm looking forward to hearing your in-depth report later in the program about President Trump and the wars in Ukraine and Gaza from a climate change perspective. Can you give us a preview?
Yeah, sure. As always, the policies of President Trump are motivated not by concern for peace and planet, but for profit and for confrontation with China. The US believes that Ukraine's deposits of rare earth and other critical minerals necessary for advanced technologies like phones and batteries would bring in tens of trillions of dollars in profit and help break its dependence on Chinese supplies. Like with past administrations, Ukraine is a pawn that has been used repeatedly by the US to pressure one of its biggest adversaries, Russia. It's not about keeping peace, but about maximizing profit. Trump is willing to not only treat Ukrainians as cannon fodder for the US's bipartisan NATO proxy war on Russia, but as canaries in his colonial mineral mining fantasies.
And what about the war in Gaza?
Trump posted a bizarre AI video of his vision for Gaza on his social media website, Truth Social, where you see Elon Musk making it rain on a beach while Trump and Netanyahu sunbath at a Trump Gaza hotel swimming pool. But his luxury resort fantasies could not be further from the reality on the ground in Gaza. As we have repeatedly previously reported, scorching war on Gaza has inflicted unprecedented environmental destruction. Despite all this, thousands of Gazans are returning to their destroyed homeland, steadfast on staying, rebuilding, and continuing to work the land, which in itself is a form of resistance.
In your investigation, you also mentioned the negative impact of the sanctions and blockade against Cuba, as well as the help they've received from China. What can we expect to hear about that?
Yeah, Cuban President Miguel Canel inaugurated the first of 92 solar parks in February as part of a Chinese-backed plan to ease hours-long blackouts across the Caribbean island nation. For decades, sanctions and the U.S. blockade have suppressed the country's economic development, preventing Cuba from repairing its energy infrastructure by blocking the importation of necessary materials and technology.
There are so many more executive orders coming from the Musk-Trump administration because none of us really know who exactly is in charge here. It's hard to keep up. The dictates often reflect a pettiness that is hard to fathom. He even signed an order banning the purchase and use of paper straws in federal buildings.
While Trump may be a climate change denier, his energy secretary, Chris Wright, is not. He simply thinks climate change is no big deal. Wright told Fox News that a warmer planet with more CO2 is better for growing plants, with 14% more greenery around the planet today than there was 40 years ago.
An article published by Forbes explains that after further investigation of the satellite imagery, the researchers found that greening was disproportionately located in China and India. If the greening was primarily a response from climate change and a warming planet, the increased vegetation shouldn't be limited to country borders. In addition, higher latitude regions should become greener faster than lower latitudes as permafrost melts and areas like northern Russia become more habitable. Both China and India went through phases of large-scale deforestation in the 1970s and 80s. clearing old growth forests for urban development, farming, and agriculture. However, it is clear that when presented with a problem, humans are incredibly adept at finding a solution.
An article published by Fox explains that there's more to greening than meets the eye. The changing color isn't so much a sign that forests and other ecosystems are regrowing, but that humans are altering the environment on a truly planetary scale, often with dire consequences. There's a lot that color alone leaves out, such as what that green is made of. To sensors on a satellite, a rainforest in Indonesia and a nearby monoculture of coffee or rubber trees look similar. They both appear green. Yet these two landscapes are dramatically different. The rainforest is home to the orangutans and rare plants and helps regulate the local climate, whereas the plantation is relatively devoid of life. Measurements of color alone fail to capture these important differences. More than that, they can mask ecosystem destruction.
Perhaps a better way to assess the effects of global warming would be to simply glance at some of the world's thermometers. What would Wright have to say about climate change if he had been in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a year ago this month, when the heat index reached 62.3 degrees Celsius or 144.1 degrees Fahrenheit? The heat index measures what the temperature feels like when combined with humidity. The actual temperature was 42 degrees Celsius or 107.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, Deborah Dita Sur, writing for the Daily Express, reports that just last month, temperatures soared to 111 degrees Fahrenheit, 44 degrees Celsius, which is the highest temperature since the southeastern Brazilian city started a climate alert system just over 10 years ago.
It's been said that the Nazi version of fascism had an allegedly green, pro environment record with the establishment of new natural reserves, a highway system designed to reduce air pollution, and other measures. That's a lie, of course. A nation that wages war and genocide against the world and its own borders can hardly be considered pro Earth.
In the paper Blood Over Soil, The Misconception of Nazi Environmentalism, Kevin Cranny of Providence College tells us that it is undeniable that it is undeniable that the Nazis had a certain appreciation for nature. This appreciation for nature, nevertheless, did not translate into environmentalism. Even though the Nazis established numerous nature preserves and an ecologically friendly forest policy, they did so for reasons outside of saving the environment. Nazi propaganda accentuated the ideological benefits of nature policies. On top of that, environmental policies were severely limited by Germany's rampant industrialization, rearmament, and war under Hitler. The Nazis were much more concerned with World War II than they were about nature preservation, which was significantly impeded during the war, especially after the Nazi defeat at Stalingrad. All things considered, conservation was at best a minor concern for most Nazis, and the claim that the Nazis were environmentalists is a hyperbolic misconception.
The all out war on nature and planet seems to be an evolution in fascist thought in late stage capitalism and US and European imperialism, where the whole world is being turned into one giant oven and genocide walks hand in hand with ecocide. It only makes sense then that movements to save the earth will walk hand in hand with immigrant rights movements and anti war movements and movements for people's democracy. Resisting fascism must be one all people's movement for peace and for planet. What we learned from World War II and the fight against fascism, round one, is that silence is complicity.
And that's why we're here with this month's Eco Solidarity Update number 5, because we will not stay silent. Please stay tuned for our feature segments and find out more about what you can do and how you can speak up to stop Trump's war on Earth. Depois, em novembro de 2025, vamos a ter oportunidade de falar todo o mundo sobre o cambio climático. Estará o COP30, a Conferência das Partes para as Negociações Climáticas. Estará em Belém, Brasil, no delta do rio Amazonas. Da parte de nós que vivimos nos Estados Unidos, o que enviamos representará as políticas do presidente Trump, que chamou as alterações climáticas de uma farsa. É mais importante do que nunca que as vozes internacionalistas das pessoas sejam ouvidas, clamando por justiça climática e soluções reais. O que podemos esperar no próximo ano em Belém? Haverá eventos alternativos e mobilizações populares. Será importante que as pessoas vá a Belém e ajudem a encher as ruas para fazer avançar as exigências dos povos e da natureza. Tem propósito final para a gente dos Estados Unidos e da gente do Brasil, como respeito à luta para a justiça climática.
Então, a COP30, que ocorrerá em Belém em novembro de 2025, será um momento, um evento muito importante para a região amazônica, mas não só para a região amazônica, para o mundo inteiro.
Uhum.
Nós estaremos, os movimentos sociais, sim, participando, né? Estamos organizando momentos de diálogos, né? de debates, de mobilização e de participação, né? Durante esse período, e onde estará ocorrendo as conferências. Vamos apresentar a nossa pauta, a pauta dos povos da Amazônia, e dialogar com toda a sociedade brasileira e internacional da importância de cuidarmos da natureza, de cuidarmos do planeta, cuidar da terra, da nossa biodiversidade, cuidar das pessoas, não só as que vivem nesse território, porque tudo que acontece na Amazônia gera impacto para o mundo inteiro. E nós precisamos cuidar desse território, mas não pensamos em uma Amazônia sem gente. Nós pensamos na Amazônia com os povos da Amazônia. Pensamos a Amazônia com a cultura do povo da Amazônia, com o trabalho realizado historicamente por estas famílias, né, por essas comunidades que vivem nesse território há muitos anos, há décadas. E nós precisamos valorizar isso que já está construído. Não é só preservar, é pensar esse preservar da Amazônia, não é colocando aqui vários grupos econômicos que agora estão, é moda dizer que estou preservando, estou cuidando da Amazônia, e extrair muita riqueza desse território para concentrar, né, aos interesses de um determinado grupo econômico. Nós não queremos sermos os operários dessas plantations, desses grupos que exploram a natureza. Nós queremos construir autonomia nesse território. E essa autonomia, com muita organização e trabalho, muita consciência ecológica, com muita consciência ambiental, né? Mas também pensando nesses agrupamentos diversos que existem na Amazônia, né? Nessa diversidade de modo de vida, né? De pessoas que na sua ancestralidade já tem uma construção, né? Já sabe como resolver determinados problemas que são inclusive ambientais, né? E que não necessitamos, né, de que venham outros de fora ditar para nós como se cuida da natureza, porque nós cuidamos já milenarmente. centenariamente, né? Há muitos anos. E aí, nesse processo de estarmos presentes na COP, né, de trazermos a nossa pauta, a nossa visão, né, a nossa concepção de Amazônia, porque a luta por justiça climática, né, ela é global e não existe saída individual. As saídas, elas são coletivas. Né? Elas são coletivas, por um processo de escuta. Nós precisamos escutar o povo que vive nesse território, para juntos construirmos alternativas. E não se apropriar daquilo que nós já estamos construindo, mas como fortalecer aquilo que nós já estamos. Né? E também, assim, que a tomada de consciência nossa no processo de mobilização, né? Porque nós sabemos que os ricos destroem a natureza. Né? Os grandes grupos econômicos destroem a natureza, porque a natureza, para eles, tem o peso apenas de transformar aquela matéria-prima em uma mercadoria. Para nós, a natureza tem outra simbologia. Ela não é uma mera mercadoria. Né? E a tomada de consciência da sociedade brasileira e mundial é muito importante. Quando nós olhamos para aquilo que nós produzimos no nosso território, nós olhamos assim, como que essa árvore, né? Como que essa floresta pode alimentar os outros que virão. Não estamos pensando só em nós. Agora nós temos que extrair tudo da natureza porque queremos ficar rico, acumular riqueza. Não. Nós queremos que essa natureza ela permaneça viva para que a futura geração possa usufruir daquilo que nós cuidamos, que nós preservamos. É preciso reflorestar, como diz os povos indígenas, as nossas mentes, os nossos corações e as nossas práticas. E a COP20, né, estaremos juntos, todos esses grupos sociais, trazendo as nossas bandeiras, né, e a nossa demanda. Né? E os ricos, essas corporações, elas precisam serem responsabilizadas pelos impactos que elas geram no meio ambiente. Fala o tempo todo, a sociedade tem que preservar, tem que cuidar. Mas esses grupos econômicos, o que eles estão cuidando? Eles estão destruindo. Então, eles precisam ser responsabilizados por isso. Né? E tem outras formas de podermos utilizar a natureza para gerar alguma economia para as comunidades que estão ali naquele território. Né? Dizer que é muito importante a gente olhar para a Amazônia e olhar pensando na população que vive nesse território. A Bolívia, né, é o país que mais perdeu essa cobertura vegetal, e o Brasil é o segundo. Então, o desmatamento ele é muito presente para avançar a pecuária, né, para avançar o plantio de soja, para avançar a cana-de-açúcar, tudo isso, assim, o desmatamento ele traz muitas consequências para a gente, né? Em nome de um desenvolvimento, de um progresso que também é um progresso para os ricos e a morte para os pobres, é a morte para a classe trabalhadora, é a morte para os que estão no campo, que estão sendo impactados, prejudicar toda a sua produção pela pulverização aérea de veneno. O tempo inteiro nós estamos sendo bombardeados, né, por aviões e drones cheios de venenos nas plantações de soja. A água é contaminada, a plantação é contaminada e as pessoas também. Elas acabam tendo problemas de pele, problemas respiratórios, problemas várias partes, né, do corpo, né, e de visão também, porque prejudica a visão, o uso intensivo de veneno nas plantações de soja. O vento leva para essas comunidades e as comunidades elas acabam sendo prejudicadas. Né? Bom, acho que essa questão em relação à COP30, né, que nós estaremos, sim, fazendo grandes mobilizações, porque o movimento é um defensor do meio ambiente. Nós estamos num grande projeto de plantar 100 mil árvores em 10 anos, conseguimos plantar 25 milhões, desculpa, 100 milhões de árvores em 10 anos, já conseguimos plantar 25 milhões em 4 anos, mas ainda temos muito que plantar, porque acreditamos que é reflorestando, não só colocar no lugar as plantas que já estavam anteriormente ali, o ipê, né, a aroeira, né, as plantas que são nativas de cada região, de cada bioma, mas também as frutíferas que fazem parte desse bioma, que vão garantir também alimentos para essas populações e agregar na sua economia.
Moça, muito obrigado, Gilvânia, por estar conosco hoje. Espero que podemos continuar a falar e que podemos voltar a falar sobre o tema de COP30 na rua, a COP30 em novembro, e espero que podemos talvez fazer uma entrevista em vivo ou ao vivo das ruas de Belém.
Sim,
Ok.
sim, estaremos com certeza nas ruas de Belém.
Sim. Ok, muito
Eu
obrigado.
acredito muito nisso. Tem várias outras informações que podemos ir trocando durante esse processo, né? Principalmente em relação aos combustíveis renováveis, né? Tem vários projetos, né, que estão trabalhando com restos de madeira, com o bagaço da cana-de-açúcar, com o estrume do gado, né? Então, assim, com os resíduos urbanos. Então, há várias formas que está se pensando, né, no Brasil, de alternativas de combustíveis, né, de produção de energia para além da solar, da eólica, né, e outras possibilidades.
Uhum. Pois, de novo, muito obrigado e nos falaremos de novo e de aqui até Belém. Ok, tchau, tchau.
Também nos encontraremos.
Muchas gracias. Continuando con otra pregunta con respecto a presencias militares y para la defensa de la región, hay una propuesta para una fuerza internacional con la participación de OTAN para la defensa de la cuenca amazónica. Mientras tanto, hay otra propuesta para la creación de una fuerza multinacional conformado solamente por los países con territorio en la cuenca. ¿Qué piensa de estas propuestas? ¿Hay otras propuestas o ideas que quiere mencionar?
Sí, en efecto. Al respecto, pues, es importante mencionar que la propuesta que tienen los países imperialistas, principalmente liderados por Estados Unidos, con la participación de la OTAN, de los países que conforman la organización del Tratado del Atlántico Norte, que son básicamente las fuerzas de Occidente en Europa, y con la alianza de Estados Unidos, de Canadá y otros países más, cuyo objetivo principal es dominar y controlar el mundo bajo la economía capitalista. Al respecto sobre ello, ya el analista político Omar Garces también había mencionado, haciendo una crítica, que todo esto viene siendo controlado por Estados Unidos para apuntar al famoso unilateralismo globalizador para que el capitalismo se consolide en el mundo. Tratan de buscar actualmente las potencias extranjeras la unificación de los esfuerzos entre estos países. Para eso utilizan diferentes organismos internacionales, como usted lo menciona, amigo James, la OTAN, la ONU, el Fondo Monetario Internacional, el Banco Mundial, la Organización Mundial del Comercio. Pero si nosotros analizamos a fondo, todos estos organismos son dominados y controlados por Estados Unidos y por los países europeos de la zona occidental, cuyo cuyo objetivo común de estos países europeos occidentales y Estados Unidos es la consolidación del modo de producción capitalista o de la economía capitalista. Entonces, si nosotros analizamos por ahí la propuesta internacional con la participación de la OTAN para defender la cuenca amazónica, entonces vamos a ver que es parte de lo mismo, es como quiero repetir el plan Amazon Lodge, el plan Resolute Sentinel, como quiero repetir también en su momento, en la década del 90, el plan Cóndor, que fue aplicado por Estados Unidos. Entonces viene a ser lo mismo, no es más de lo mismo. Ahora, existe también otra propuesta, como usted lo menciona, amigo Jay, donde existe la creación de una fuerza multinacional donde esté conformada todos los países que tengan territorios en la cuenca amazónica, ya sea Colombia, Perú, Brasil, Venezuela, entre otros países más que tengan Amazonía. Sería una propuesta interesante, porque recordemos que ya existía una propuesta también inicial, propuesta por el expresidente de Venezuela, Hugo Chávez Frías, donde planteaba la integración de los países latinoamericanos y también caribeños para tratar temas en común, para tratar temas que tenemos, donde nos une un pasado y un presente en común. En este caso, el presente en común sería los países que tengan y que cuenten con la biodiversidad de la Amazonía sudamericana. ¿De qué manera nosotros, los países que pertenecemos a la cuenca amazónica, nos vemos en primer lugar beneficiados y podemos tratar nosotros de dar apoyo bilateral entre los países, ya sea con asistencia humanitaria, con asistencia social, ya sea con intercambio cultural, intercambio de la biodiversidad, de la flora, de la fauna? Entonces sería interesante retomar esa propuesta que en su momento el expresidente de Venezuela, Hugo Chávez Frías, ya lo había planteado. Y si nosotros también queremos hacer una retrospección histórica, analizar más a profundidad la historia, esto es algo ya que en su momento también eh, el, el, el libertador Simón Bolívar había manifestado la integración de América Latina unida, porque a nosotros, los latinoamericanos, nos une un pasado en común que es la dominación extranjera. Hemos tenido nosotros la misma dominación, que es la dominación española del siglo XVI. Hemos tenido luego la dominación inglesa durante el siglo XIX y actualmente la dominación y la injerencia norteamericana en pleno siglo XXI. Entonces nosotros tenemos los países latinoamericanos, tenemos un pasado en común. Entonces, partiendo de esa propuesta inicial de que tenemos un pasado común, debemos unificar esfuerzos, en primer lugar, para defender nuestra soberanía territorial, que son los países de América Latina, para tener nuestra propia autonomía y nuestra voluntad política para poder decidir sobre lo que queremos y no queremos hacer en nuestros países de América Latina. Y en segundo lugar, para ver de qué manera nosotros, los países que tenemos y que pertenecemos a la cuenca hidrográfica del Amazonas, podamos defender y preservar nuestra principal fuente de reserva de agua dulce, que es el pulmón del mundo, la Amazonía sudamericana. Entonces, yo veo más saludable, amigo James, más viable y más factible esta segunda propuesta, que es la que puedan conformar varios países que tengan relación o que tengan injerencia básicamente en la cuenca del Amazonas. Yo me inclinaría por esta segunda propuesta. Pueden existir otras propuestas más, como usted lo hace en la pregunta, ¿no es cierto? Pueden existir otras propuestas de integración económica, política, social, pero sería ideal, retomando las ideas del libertador Simón Bolívar, que son recogidas y que fueron recogidas en su momento por el presidente Hugo Chávez, de la integración latinoamericana y más particularmente de los países que conforman la cuenca amazónica. Yo veo eso más viable porque aparte del pasado en común que tenemos de la dominación extranjera, tenemos las potencialidades en común. Los países de Perú, Colombia, Brasil, Venezuela, tenemos pues las características de la biodiversidad amazónica, tenemos la misma flora, la misma fauna, el mismo tronco lingüístico que tenemos de las familias lingüísticas que hablan las diferentes lenguas originarias de la Amazonía peruana. Entonces, por ahí que nos une un lazo en común que netamente tenga que ver sobre el tema de la Amazonía, de la biodiversidad, de los diferentes climas, diferentes ecosistemas y del bosque específicamente. Yo, como le digo, amigo James, le veo más viable la segunda propuesta que usted me ha mencionado, puesto que la primera propuesta, donde se plantea que la OTAN sea la que lidere este movimiento para defender la Amazonía, no le veo factible, puesto que cuyo objetivo de ellos es la militarización de la Amazonía para apoderarse de nuestra biodiversidad. Eso es lo que le puedo mencionar.
Sí, muchas gracias. Creo pues la cuarta pregunta creo que ya respondió mucho de eso, de pues qué son las razones de la presencia militar de Estados Unidos allí pues por eso nomás quería elaborar más. Sé que aquí una compañera puso un comentario de que ayer tuvieron una reunión con la PCM, con el gobierno regional de Loreto, autoridades, alcaldes y regidores de toda la región y es lamentable informarles que hay poca información y un hermetismo de parte del Ministerio del Interior y Exterior ante las autoridades locales. Se incomodan cuando una pregunta y se incomodan cuando una pregunta sobre el tema. Entonces puede elaborar sobre eso, cómo están reaccionando las comunidades allí que son afectadas por eso, cómo se están movilizando, organizando para implementar estas propuestas y ideas que quieren lograr y desarrollar allá en la región.
Sí, lo que se busca acá en la Amazonía peruana es principalmente el respeto y la defensa de las comunidades indígenas sobre su propio territorio. Es cierto que existen algunas relaciones bilaterales, ya sea por parte del gobernador regional o por parte de algunas autoridades locales, pero eso solamente forma parte de un cliché, si podemos decir así, de querer hacer algo por la Amazonía, pero forma parte solamente ese cliché. Cuando lo que nosotros realmente buscamos, los activistas políticos, ambientalistas, nosotros proponemos un cambio justamente de esa política económica neoliberal. Por eso nosotros formamos parte de una organización que es el PTE, el Partido de los Trabajadores y Emprendedores, cuyo objetivo, cuyo objetivo con respecto a la Amazonía es la defensa irrestricta de nuestros recursos naturales, defender la soberanía de los pueblos originarios que habitan en la cuenca amazónica, que ellos sean los que decidan sobre su territorio, no que vengan personas extranjeras, foráneas, ni mucho menos de otros países, a tomar decisiones con respecto a cómo se debe vivir, cómo se debe conservar la flora, la fauna, el ecosistema, los bosques de varillal, los bosques de agua dulce en la Amazonía peruana. No, no queremos eso, queremos que los actores del progreso, del desarrollo de las comunidades que viven en las cuencas amazónicas tiene que nacer desde el punto de vista de ellos, de las comunidades indígenas. Es cierto que existen leyes, como el caso de la consulta previa, pero muchas veces esta ley de la consulta previa, que es una ley que está estipulado en el convenio 169 de la Organización Internacional del Trabajo, muchas veces esta consulta previa es letra muerta. Es letra muerta porque solamente lo utilizan para fines políticos a algunas autoridades de turno, cuando no le utilizan realmente para el beneficio de las comunidades indígenas que habitan en la Amazonía peruana y en las diferentes cuencas que componen la Amazonía sudamericana, en este caso la peruana, también valga la especificación o la redundancia. Entonces nosotros consideramos que las leyes actuales que están vigentes se lo deben aplicar en la práctica, tal como lo dice, y también respetando y dando la soberanía respectiva a los pueblos originarios que habitan en las diferentes cuencas. Para citar un solo ejemplo nomás, cada vez que existe o se encuentra algún tipo de yacimiento de hidrocarburos en alguna comunidad indígena, solamente se le consulta a la comunidad cuando se encuentra el hidrocarburo, en este caso el petróleo. muchas veces no se toma en cuenta los grados de contaminación que hacen las empresas en las principales cuencas de los ríos amazónicos que existen acá en la Amazonía peruana. Por eso siempre existen problemas ambientales acá en esta zona de la Amazonía peruana, en la zona del río Marañón, donde existen diferentes empresas que explotan el hidrocarburo, principalmente el petróleo, donde siempre contaminan y contaminan, y los pueblos originarios paran en constante pelea, en constante lucha con estas empresas extranjeras. Es por ello que nosotros decimos que estas famosas leyes que existen, la ley de consulta previa, a veces es una ley que tiene letra muerta porque en la práctica no se le ejecuta y no se le cumple. Por eso es importante que las leyes se le tienen que respetar, y qué mejor que con la acción y con la predisposición de las mismas comunidades que son actores dentro de su propio territorio, porque ellos son los que deben decidir. Eso es lo que nosotros proponemos, que exista esa predisposición y esa verdadera soberanía por parte de las comunidades que habitan en las cuencas amazónicas, mi estimado James y señorita que nos está haciendo la entrevista.
Pues muchas gracias por toda esta información muy interesante y muy vital para, para todos nosotros, para todo el pueblo del mundo, y gracias por parte de la Alianza por la Justicia Global. Antes de terminar la entrevista, quiero saber si tienes unos comentarios finales.
Sí, sí, no, más bien agradecer el espacio que nos das para poder llegar a muchos cibernautas. Somos parte de un referente también político acá en la ciudad de Iquitos, que pertenece al país que es el Perú. A nivel nacional somos el Partido de los Trabajadores y Emprendedores, y también queremos dar nuestro mensaje político, que es un mensaje de cambio. Nosotros somos una alternativa al proyecto económico neoliberal que hay en el Perú. Proponemos una nueva constitución a través de una asamblea constituyente donde tenga la participación activa de todo el pueblo peruano y todos los sectores que pertenecen a nuestra patria, que es el Perú, y dentro de ellos están incluidas nuestras comunidades indígenas de la Amazonía peruana, por quienes nosotros guardamos un respeto irrestricto por ser los guardianes ser los preservadores de nuestra cultura amazónica. Solo eso quería decir. Somos un referente que busca el cambio, y estamos acá no solamente para defender el tema ambiental, sino para también defender todos los derechos de los trabajadores y de las clases desposeídas en nuestro país. Proponemos un cambio como una alternativa y un referente político. Le agradezco a usted por el espacio que nos da, y estamos acá a disposición de usted cuando nos gusta y cuando nos busque.
Pues de nuevo, Erick, muchas gracias para esa información y la presentación. De nuevo, creo que es muy importante para toda la gente oír, y gracias a tu partido y las organizaciones locales en Iquitos, y esperamos que nos vemos pronto.
Hello, my name is Tanya Nuñez with the Alliance for Global Justice, and this is a special segment for episode 5 of our Eco-Solidarity Update. Please support us by subscribing to our channel if you haven't already, liking this video and sharing it. Brazilian trade unionist and ecologist Chico Mendes once said, "Ecology without class struggle is just gardening." As we enter an era of unprecedented ecological devastation, a rise in fascism, threat of nuclear war, and full-scale genocide and ecocide happening as we speak, now more than ever, it's crucial to understand what he meant. At the heart of all political and economic struggles is the issue of land, water, resources, etc., and labor. Vice versa, focusing on environmental issues without addressing the underlying power dynamics of class and capitalism is insufficient to address the root causes of ecological problems. When we look at nature itself, the health of the plants is determined by how healthy the roots are. The same can be said of our system. If we do not take a radical approach in addressing the most pressing issues of our times, grasping at the roots, as Angela Davis once said, the future of humanity and our planet looks bleak. For Chico Mendes, environmental issues, workers' rights, and broader political goals were central to the struggle he was waging as a leader of the local union of rubber tappers, an active member of the growing Workers' Party, and an advocate of socialist ecology. Taken from the book Fight for the Forest, Chico Mendes, in his own words, says, "My dream is to see this entire forest conserved because we know it can guarantee the future of all the people who live in it. Not only that, I believe that in a few years, the Amazon can become an economically viable region, not only for us, but for the nation, for all of humanity, and for the whole planet. We realized that in order to guarantee the future of the Amazon, we had to find a way to preserve the forest while at the same time developing the region's economy. We accepted that the Amazon could not be turned into some kind of sanctuary that nobody could touch. On the other hand, we knew it was important to stop the deforestation that is threatening the Amazon and all human life on the planet. We felt our alternative should involve preserving the forests, but it should also include a plan to develop the economy. So we came up with the idea of extractive reserves. I recommend you watch the interviews we've done with Gilvânia Ferreira from Brazil and Erick Saenz from Peru regarding the current threats to the Amazon and popular movements in the area that are standing up in defense of the rainforest. It shouldn't be a surprise by now that Trump is escalating at full throttle the threat of another world war, despite a campaign of peace many of his followers believe him to be taking. Sure, Trump's attacks on immigrants, Palestinian students, China, and others seems unprecedented, and in a lot of ways, they are. We should denounce it vehemently because it is an extremely chaotic, irrational, and violent approach. But as we like to say, Trump is only a symptom of a larger disease, the disease of capitalism and imperialism. Trump, along with all the other billionaires, is a result of a system upheld and reinforced by all previous US presidents, whether they've been Republicans or Democrats. Let us not forget the horrific images of Border Patrol agents on horseback at the Texas border unleashing violence on Haitian refugees during the first year of Biden's presidency, when he continued to enforce Title 42, a policy imposed by Trump during his first term as president and that resulted in the mass deportation of thousands of people. Or how Barack Obama was coined the deporter-in-chief for deporting the record number of people during his administration and building the ICE infrastructure to make mass incarceration and deportation possible under Trump's regime. Also notable is the fact that it was Obama's administration that attempted to quell, through militarized police, the movement led by the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and water protectors to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, the largest indigenous-led movement since Wounded Knee. Despite multiple court orders to try to stop the construction and operation of DALP throughout the Obama, Biden, and Trump administrations, as of now, the pipeline is fully operational. Moreover, what is most outrageous is that in March, a jury of 9 in North Dakota ordered the environmental campaign group Greenpeace to pay more than $660 million in damages to Texas-based oil company Energy Transfer, the developer of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The attacks on migrants, the militarization of the border, and the repression of liberation movements in defense of human and environmental rights have always been a bipartisan effort. Not just that, but while climate-induced migration is becoming more of a reality, the world's wealthiest nations, which historically are the most responsible for the climate crisis, are prioritizing borders over climate action. A 2020 report by the Transnational Institute found that rich countries spend more on militarizing their borders than on providing climate finance to enable the poorest countries to help migrants. Key findings in the report also show that the border security industry is profiting from climate change, with top border contractors boasting of the potential increase in the revenue from climate change. One of the largest weapons manufacturing companies in the world, Raytheon, says it anticipates it anticipates, quote, demand for its military products and services as security concerns may arise as a result of droughts, floods, and storm events as a result of climate change, unquote. The report also shows that the border security industry provides security to the oil industry, which is one of the main contributors to the climate crisis, and even sits on each other's executive boards. Trump's agenda over the last few months has been clear. Tax breaks and incentives for his billionaire friends at the expense of the working people of the entire world. From Elon Musk from South Africa to Javier Milei in Argentina, Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, and Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel, Trump is rounding up all his favorite dictators and war criminals of the world to be in cahoots with him. Notably, in February, Trump's meeting at the White House with Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky reaffirmed Henry Kissinger's famous quote that being America's enemy was dangerous, but being America's friend is fatal. Trump wants to turn Ukraine into a U.S. colony to exploit of its, quote, raw earth minerals, as the POTUS repeatedly stated. The U.S. believes that Ukrainians' deposits of rare earth and other critical minerals necessary for advanced technologies like phones and batteries would bring in tens of trillions of dollars in profit and help break its dependence on China's supplies.
We have security in a different form. We'll have workers there digging, taking the raw earth so that we can create a lot of great product in this country.
How does this provide long-term security for Ukraine?
Well, we don't know exactly how much because we're going to be putting some money in a fund that we're going to get from the raw earth that we're going to be taking and sharing in terms of revenue. So it's going to be a lot of money will be made from the sale and from the use of raw earth. And as you know, our country doesn't have much raw earth. We have a lot of oil and gas, but we don't have a lot of the raw earth. And what we do have is protected by the environmentalists, but that can be unprotected, but still it's not very much. They have among the best in the world in terms of raw earth. So we're going to be using that, using it for all of the things we do, including AI and including weapons and the military, and it's really going to very much satisfy our needs. So it's something that just worked out really well. We have a lot of oil, and we have a lot of gas, we have a lot, but we don't have raw earth. So this has just about every component of the raw earth that we need for computers, for all of the things we do.
I recommend checking out Ben Norton's report on Geopolitical Economy Report to learn more details about Trump's plans on Ukraine. Like with past administrations, Ukraine is a pawn that has been used repeatedly by the US to pressure one of its biggest adversaries, Russia. It's not about keeping peace, but about maximizing profits. Trump is willing not only treat Ukrainians as cannon fodder for the US bipartisan NATO proxy war in Russia, but also as canaries in his colonial mineral mining fantasies. Another recent visitor to the White House has been war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, who has resumed with the help of the Trump administration the vicious bombardment of Gaza in the last few weeks, already killing hundreds. Netanyahu even reportedly took a longer flight route, roughly 400 kilometers more, to avoid running the risk of arrest in a country that could potentially enforce the ICC arrest warrant. In February, Trump posted a bizarre AI video of his vision for Gaza on his social media website, Truth Social, where you can see Elon Musk making it rain on a beach while Trump and Netanyahu sunbathe at Trump Gaza Hotel swimming pool. Trump has continued the US and Israel's project of ethnic cleansing in Gaza so he can fulfill his dream of building a luxury real estate development on the war-torn land he called a demolition site. But his luxury resort fantasies could not be further from the reality on the ground in Gaza. As we've previously reported, scorching war on Gaza has inflicted unprecedented environmental destruction, which according to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, will take tens of billions of dollars and decades to reverse. According to an article published on Yale Environment 360, the Palestinian territory of Gaza extends over 24 miles along the shore of the eastern Mediterranean. Though small, it is a biodiversity hotspot and the crossroad for wildlife from Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. It has more than 250 bird species and 100 mammal species, from wildcats and wolves to mongooses and mole rats, according to research conducted over the past 2 decades by the foremost expert on the territory's fauna and flora, Abdel Fattah Abdarabu, of the Islamic University of Gaza in Gaza City. But both wildlife and the human population had been sustained by its abundant underground water reserves. But with a growing population and ongoing occupation war, the public supplies have dramatically diminished. Last October, the Palestine Water Authority reported that 85% of water facilities were at least partially out of action. The systematic destruction of Gaza's wastewater infrastructure is a calculated act of environmental warfare, pushing the region into an irreversible humanitarian and ecological crisis. The collapse of sanitation systems is not just a side effect of war, it is a deliberate strategy to make Gaza uninhabitable. After the short-lived ceasefire a few months back, farmers were returning to their lands to find scorched trees and toxic soil. Analysis from UN satellite data suggests 41% of the Gaza Strip comprises of cropland. For Gaza, agriculture was once, quote, one of the most important components, unquote, of Gaza's gross domestic product, contributing $343 million to its economy, according to the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. The Bureau now estimates that every day, Gaza's agricultural sector loses nearly 2 million, as nearly 70% of Gaza's croplands have been destroyed by the Israeli military. Despite all this, thousands of Gazans will not be stopped in their efforts to return to their destroyed homeland, steadfast on staying, rebuilding, and continuing to work the land, which in itself is a form of resistance. Cuba, another nation that has been a top target for U.S. aggression, also continues to resist and is putting substantial efforts towards ecological sustainability with the help of the Communist government of China. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel inaugurated the first of 92 solar parks in February as part of a Chinese-backed plan to ease hours-long blackouts across the Caribbean island nation. For decades, sanctions on the U.S. blockade have suppressed the country's economic development, preventing Cuba from repairing its energy infrastructure by blocking the importation of necessary materials and technology. Now, with the help of China and countries like Russia and Turkey, the recent park in Havana is one of 65 expected to come online this year, generating 1,200 megawatts, with the remainder opening by 2028. Cuba is making efforts to expand its national energy production and is looking to renewable energy to solve its energy problem. Already, Cuba has been recognized as the most sustainably developed country in the world, based on the Sustainable Development Index, which considers human development alongside ecological impact. And of course, I cannot end this video without talking about China. China has become the main target for Trump's global trade war, most recently imposing 125% tariffs on Beijing. However, it didn't take long for Trump to be forced to issue exemptions for Chinese-made cell phones, computers, semiconductors, and other electronics because the US cannot make them and depends on China more than China depends on the US. China's state-led economic development model and robust industrial policy have transformed it into the world's sole manufacturing superpower, with diversified markets and control of strategic materials, according to a European think tank. The US is also reliant on China for many rare earth metals essential for modern manufacturing, such as in electric vehicle batteries. Beijing controls more than 2/3 of global rare earth production and more than 90% of processing capacity. China has become a leader in industries such as tech, agriculture, and of course, green energy and environmental sustainability. In an article published in the monthly review called Marxist Ecology in China, From Marxist Ecology to Socialist Eco-Civilization Theory, Chen Yuan describes China's critical examination of the modern environmental crisis and engagement in Marxist ecology research beginning in the 1980s. Chinese research has primarily concentrated on the assertion that the logic of capital is a root cause of the ecological crisis. The article also discusses China's construction of socialist eco-civilization theory as a distinctive product of Chinese Marxist ecology, which emphasizes the necessity and superiority of socialist principles, systems, and ideologies in effectively addressing environmental challenges. One of the most fundamental proposition, perhaps the most pivotal, Chen Yuen writes, is encapsulated in the phrase, lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. The full statement of this proposition was made by Xi in 2013, saying, we, quote, we want to have not only mountains of gold, but also mountains of green. If we must choose between the two, we would rather have the green than the gold. In any case, green mountains are themselves gold mountains. Indeed, Xi is correct. Nothing is more important to the welfare of humanity than the preservation and care of our planet Earth. The only thing getting in the way of this reality is a ruling class of capitalist billionaires who would prefer to wage wars, destroy the environment, and suppress movements in defense of the land to maximize profits for themselves than address this existential threat that is affecting everyone in some way or form. Now more than ever, we must resonate with Chico Mendes' words because the war being waged on the environment is, in fact, a class war. You cannot claim to be for the environment without standing up against war. Now is a time to stand side by side with the land defenders, with the water protectors, the national liberation fighters, if we want to save the planet. We must fight like hell against those waging our war on our people and the planet.
lueguito, tan solo echa un vistazo y vuelve a lueguito. Ay, pobrecito el sur, como lo considero, a mí también me pasa, por ser un carrañero, por eso le cantamos un verso a la vida, para que no se sienta solito en esta vida, para que no se sienta solito en esta vida, para que no se sienta solito en